Welcome to Product Rising's monthly series, In the Lead. Joining Carmen for this month's conversation is Marty Cagan. He is the founder of Silicon Valley Product Group and widely considered a primary thought leader in the field of product management. Marty is also the author of the influential books on product, Inspired: How to Create Tech Products Customers Love, Empowered: Ordinary People, Extraordinary Products, and Transformed: Moving to the Product Operating Model. Marty and his team at SVPG have been exploring the use of AI foundation models as product coaches. As always, Marty has strong views on how the adoption of AI technology enables product builders, increases the importance of truly empowered product managers, and can assist in the transition by coaching both product and project managers. Carmen wanted to understand more deeply how things are changing in the field and how to help everyone advance their skills and knowledge. Here is their conversation.
Marty, thank you so much for being here. I wanted to start with something that you wrote earlier this year that really caught my attention. You've been writing about the reckoning coming for product managers for years. I think the ones for product managers who are operating as backlog administrators or herding features for stakeholders instead of really solving those real problems and solving towards, what is that outcome? And earlier this year, you said that the reckoning has begun. And so our community at Women in Product, we're over 35,000 women strong. Many of them are talented and dedicated product leaders, and we're working inside of organizations that, have them really in a lot of these positions. But what I find generally exciting about where you've taken your thinking and what you've been speaking about is it's not just sounding an alarm, but it's about pointing to a specific path forward and involving something that I think our community can act on immediately. So I want to spend some time talking about that today, and go deep into that. So it's not just the warning, but a transformation. And I think what it actually looks like to step into that empowered product role in the age of AI, and how AI coaching specifically changes that path. So what are you seeing in the market right now? And give us some real examples and maybe some hypotheticals.
Well, thanks again for inviting me, Carmen. It's and I, to be honest, I wouldn't frame myself as like somebody who predicted the future long before it happened. But what I was saying, and I think has proven correct, well before generative AI, the writing was on the wall. The writing has been on the wall. We've had these two, depending on how you want to describe it, two or maybe three very different ways of doing product management. And it's been very clear for a long time, I think, to anybody paying attention, that the best companies were not doing it the way most companies were doing it. And there was a real trend, I mean, if for no other reason, driven by company valuation.
Yeah.
So the boards all want to be valued like innovative, company. And that usually gets valued at least on the order of 10x more than the non-innovative companies. So it's been very clear what happened, and there's been a gradual move. Has it been as fast as I wished it would happen? It's never as fast as I wish things would happen. That's the nature of the game for most product people, that we're used to that, right? We see what's going to happen before it actually happens. But what happened was GenAI lit a fire under this whole topic, because GenAI kind of made the debate kind of academic. It was like, well, you can argue if you want, but your company's probably not going to be here. So it's really just sort of made it like people don't argue it anymore. And so now we see, and what I was warning people about for several years was, look, the companies that do decide that those old models are not helpful, they're going to start laying off. They've already been talking about this, and that has happened for sure. It's been happening for a while, and it's still happening. It's more, On the other hand, one of the things that we can really point to today is the people in the model that the good companies use, they're being rewarded like never before. Their salaries have nearly doubled in the Bay Area. It's so both the old model's getting laid off and the new model is they can't hire them fast enough. So I don't spend a lot of time debating it anymore. Um, Especially, with I sort of spent enough time with my friends in the community that they kind of know these opinions. But I think a lot of people are kind of there now. They're dealing with, okay, we know we need to change, but wow, it's hard to change. It is
Absolutely.
hard to change, and that's true. And so there's still some real work to be done for product creators, the product managers and designers and engineers, but also for product leaders. And product leaders, I mean, we can talk about either of those two groups or both, depending on your interest. But there's very different responsibilities for product managers in the new world and product leaders in the new world.
Yes, absolutely. I'd like to dig into like actually both of them. I mean, we serve folks who are in those product management roles all the way up to those leaders. And in conversations I'm having constantly, I'm getting those questions. So when we're talking about like, what does it look like the transformation for those? Let's start with the product managers. What are you seeing? Like who are the folks who are transitioning well, and what does that look like?
Well, of course, there's lots that has been published
Yes.
about this, not just by me and but by others too. But so you can really go as deep into this as you care to. But the best, maybe cut to the chase, and this is going to sound a little like tough love, because it's really important to realize this. There are feature teams and there are empowered product teams. In a feature
Mhm.
team, you're given a roadmap of features and projects to build. That's output. In that model, the truth is, and this has been true for 20 years, you don't really need a product manager. Never needed a product manager, because really what the product manager would do was being done by stakeholders.
Mhm.
So what you do need, in fairness, and that's what most product managers end up doing in a feature team company, is you need project managers. You need people that can herd the cats and say, okay, let's gather up what everybody needs. Let's make sure the designers and the engineers have what they need so that they can do what they need to do, and we can get this built, and then we can get it tested, and then we can get it deployed, and we can get it, operating in our company. That's super useful, but that's not product management. That's what
That's
we
right.
mean by like, come on, everybody, this is just theater. That's not product management.
Mhm.
That's project management. It's still important, but don't confuse it with product management. And furthermore, in that feature team model, the team can't take responsibility for outcomes because they've already been given the solution on the
Mhm.
roadmap. So in a product team, the we don't have those stakeholders to give us this information. We have a problem to solve, and our cross-functional product team has to solve that problem in a way that solves for the customer and solves for the business. And if you don't have somebody that understands the business, understands the stakeholder constraints, good luck, because your engineers aren't going to know this and your designer's not going to know this. So this is what a real product manager brings to the table. The way we frame this, it's not the only way to frame it, but we find it pretty useful, is every product has 4 potential risks. Value, would the customer buy it? Usability, can they figure out how to use it? Feasibility, do we know how to build it? And viability, will it work for our business? The designer covers usability, the engineer covers feasibility, but the product manager covers value and viability. And again, if you don't have somebody with the skills to do that, uh, you're going to have a really hard time delivering outcomes. And by the way, your engineers are going to scream at you because they know that they need somebody that knows this on the team. And if you don't know it, they're going to go right back to the stakeholders. And so the nature of an empowered product team is you're given this problem to solve. one of the ways that a lot of people helps them understand, there's somebody you may know in the product community. He's been a friend of mine forever. His name is
Mhm.
Jeff Patton. Jeff wrote a book, User Story Mapping, which is all about product discovery. And anyway, Jeff coined the term, in a modern product team, we're all builders. We are all builders. That's why you've probably heard in a lot of these
Yeah.
good companies today, if you go interview for a product manager job, the first thing they ask you to do, they'll give you a problem to solve, and then they'll say, what prototyping tool are you going to use? Show us how you create a prototype, and then show us how you plan to test that prototype. Because they know this is the job. We're builders. However, there is a big difference between, and I'm using Jeff's words here. We have lots of other words that describe this, but this resonates well. Product managers are all about building to learn, and engineers are all about building to earn. So the point is, in discovery, we're trying to prototype so that we can figure out if we have a solution worth building, which means valuable, usable, feasible, viable. In delivery, we are building a production quality product, something scalable, reliable, fault tolerant, secure, privacy respected, compliant, and then we deliver that to our customers.
Mhm.
Very different skills and very different tools that we use. That's why the best product managers doing build to learn are actually using different tool suites than the engineers, which everybody knows about the breakthrough tools for engineers for building to earn, things like Claude Code and Cursor, which have just made it so much better to build to earn. But those tools are not designed to build to learn. Um,
Right.
you can use any tool for anything, really, but they're not for that. There's much faster ways to do it. There's a whole different suite of tools that are designed for prototyping.
Love it. And which are your favorites? Are you able to say what your favorites are?
Yeah, I mean, but honestly, every few weeks they change my favorites
Yeah,
just
that's
because
true.
it is such a hot area right now. Honestly, it is a gold. I view this as a golden era for product people just
Yeah.
because of this, the tools and methods. But for example, Lovable is terrific. I'm still
Yes.
expecting a real breakthrough from Figma. Figma
Mhm.
Make is clearly directional, but not there yet, but it will be there, I believe. I really have a lot of admiration for that company. And if you think about it, they're like perfectly positioned to do that well. If they
Mhm.
don't do it well, it's on them, but somebody else will step in and take that from them.
Yeah, I love what you said about, just being this is the age for builders. I think a lot of folks maybe who either are in leadership positions and haven't had their hands in there, this is the time to be able to find that passion and build again. We just did our hackathon for Women's History Month, partnered with Lovable, and the amazing ideas and the prototyping and how
Yeah,
much
that's
they brought
perfect.
to life was just amazing. So I agree with you. It
Perfect.
sort of gives us that time to actually to take what we're thinking and prototype that and get that out there.
Well, I was just going to say, it's also very useful litmus test for anyone who is considering, like, do I really want to do product in this new era? If
Mm,
you don't truly love prototyping and then testing those prototypes with stakeholders, with users, with business owners, with other engineers, if you don't love that, that's not the role for you,
yeah.
because that really has always been the role. And now it's so clear, because the truth is, yes, it has always been the role, but we leaned on our designers and our engineers to do a lot of the prototyping for us.
Yes. Yeah.
Today, it's like, what do you mean you can't prototype? Of course you can prototype. You can read, you can speak, you can prototype. And so, we're expected to be quite good at that. Now, does that mean you should be awesome at Claude Code? If you want, but that's like nice to have. That's not
Yeah.
the essential thing. And
Yeah.
this is a really useful litmus test, because some people, including product managers, are really attracted to Claude Code. And just to be very clear, I think that's one of the best products in history now. But they're using it not like an engineer, not like it's
Mm.
designed. They're using it as a project management tool. So if you are missing, if you're pining for the days where you weren't expected to build and test, prototype and test with our stakeholders and our users, then you might be attracted to that for the wrong reason.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So folks who have had that opportunity and have moved away from it, so many folks are just saying the fire has come back in terms of building. So that accessibility is wonderful. I want to pivot a little bit. So in February, you wrote that there was a significant change from the 20 years of advocacy. And I think that was really remarkable to say. So was there a point in time that you changed your mind, like something that you saw work or that you maybe feared something would happen without it?
Well, first of all, we should make clear for everybody what we were talking about.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
for forever, what we have been arguing, just because it was the best we knew, um, was that the way, how do you learn to work this way? How do
Hmm.
you learn? Uh, I learned from a manager, actually many managers, who coached me over time. First as an engineer, then as an engineering leader, and then as an engineering manager, and then as a product manager, and then as a product leader. I learned from managers who took the time and interest to coach me.
Hmm.
And in every major product model company, from Apple to Google to Amazon to Netflix, they all prioritize coaching as the management responsibility. Google long time says the number one attribute of a good manager at Google is you're a good coach.
Yeah.
So this is how you learn. And so we're all about sharing the practices of these consistently good companies, and that's one of them. The problem is, and I'll be honest with you, we have acknowledged this problem for more than 10 years. It's
Hmm.
just that we didn't know what to do about it. That was the truth.
That's
Um,
true. Mhm.
and the problem was companies that don't work that way. So everybody I name dropped a second ago were basically product model native companies. They grew up this way. This is
Mhm.
how they work. But in a company that's old school, it uses the project model but wants to change, to transform, this has always been the weak link. And the first thing, honestly, the first thing we tell the leaders is your number one responsibility in transforming is to coach your people. And everybody would say the same thing. Okay, we're all in, and then we would talk to the people after a month, after a quarter, after a year, and they go, yeah, we get no coaching, no coaching. And they're like reaching out. Do you have a network? And I told a lot of them about women in product. I mean, you can probably find somebody that's a good mentor there for you. Start going to meetups, stuff like that. But what we realized a long time ago was that only a small subset of the leaders take that responsibility seriously. Now, in fairness to them, there's two big reasons why leaders say they don't do it. One, and by the way, I really beat a lot of them up about this. It was like, come on, this is how else were your people, and what higher order job do you have than to get your people effective, right? I mean, that's the job of a leader. And they would say, well, number one, I never worked this way myself, so I really don't know what the heck I'm talking about.
Oh, wow. Hmm.
That's fair. That's fair, right? Now, some companies, the CEOs realize that and they bring in new leaders.
Hmm.
And that's the biggest reason they usually bring them in is because they want people that have, quote, been there, done that. So
Right.
they bring in a leader from Amazon and they bring in a leader from Google and they expect them then to coach their managers who will coach their people. And that works. It's just brutal, right? It's in a large company, that's a lot of people
Yeah.
that are impacted. The other thing they say is that, in the management world, it's referred to as span of control, the average number
Yes.
of reports a manager
Mhm.
has. That has been going up. And
Yes.
I don't really disagree that it should go up. It should go up, but it's been going up faster than the people have been able to improve the efficiency of their coaching. And so the result is most leaders out there either can't or won't spend the time coaching. So we have acknowledged this problem. You may have noticed if you've sort of followed us for the last few years, we've been very actively developing a network, an informal network of professional product coaches that we introduce to companies every single week. Now, these people are basically a rented coach, right? They
Yeah.
go in and they help, and some operate on individual contributors. They help for product discovery coaching, for example, and some of them coach product leaders. It's called product leadership coaches. But that's helpful right on the fringe, right?
Yeah.
It's minor. So what changed? That's a long way of saying that was the problem. And that problem has been there and it's been the weak link forever. What changed was about, 3 years ago, the models came out. The large language models. I'm using models, the product operating models and large
Yeah.
language models.
Lots of
Not the
models.
same kind of model, but they are forms of models. Anyway, large language models came out. And the first year, they were pretty weak. They were cool, but they were pretty weak. We kind of developed the first year our own set of people are sending us these things saying that this is what the product model says. And we're going like, where does this come from? It's nonsense, and it took us a while. By the second year, it was getting significantly better,
Yeah.
not awful. The main thing we noticed was that the severity of bad answers seemed to go down and the frequency went down.
Okay.
But starting about 9 months ago, it was like, oh my gosh, this new round of models from all three major players was like, damn, this is like as good as a typical manager right now. And you're not limited to a 1 hour a week coaching.
True.
Right? You can put it on your phone anywhere you've got an internet connection. You can have 7x24 coaching, whatever you want. And so we started to get excited about 9 months ago. Then there was the question, well, how should this be done? Should it be done should we train one of the models to be like a great, or should we, because it seemed pretty clear that the core models were getting significantly better in this front. We had already verified that the models had been illegally trained on our books and stuff anyway. So that and you're not going to fight it. What are you going to do? You're just going to okay, well, at least the other thing besides the models getting better is during this time, all of us, including me, including my partners, we all got better at knowing how to instruct the language models, how to provide the right strategic context, the right information so that prompts were relevant. For example, I'm going to mention this because it's super important for the people that might want to try this out, which I hope everybody in Women in Product tries it out at least, because it truly is a game changer for your career at any level. I would argue it's a game changer. And that is one of the things we realized is that so many in our informal benchmark of product coaching questions, we would, some answers were good and some were okay and some were not very good. But we noticed that a lot of them were not even self-consistent. In other words, they would give you conflicting messages. And what we realized was going on was we knew the models were trained in our content, but we also realized it had been trained in the majority of content out there, which is all about the project model.
Yeah.
And so the language models don't know. They don't know if you have to tell the language model, I'm trying to work in the project model or I'm trying to work in the product model.
Sure.
In fact, that one piece of guidance is huge. You also have to tell it, you want it to play the role of a coach, which is not about affirmation. It's about helping you actually get to a good outcome. So it knows what it means to be a coach. It knows how it's supposed to challenge and push and point out flaws. And so this is good. But once we realized there were these set of things that you needed to provide to the model so that its advice was much more relevant, combined with the models getting better on a near weekly basis now. And the result is today we believe, we published this when we believed we had reached this tipping point, that I'll also say this. I think for about 6 months, I was asking the wrong question myself. I
Okay.
kept asking, is the model a great product coach? And then I realized that's the wrong question.
Okay.
The right question is it better than what they get? Is it good enough to help them get competent at their job, which is actually a much lower bar? And I realized, yes, it is absolutely. You can become a very competent product manager or, to a lesser degree, product leader with this tool, with using a language model as a coach. And that's the most important question. Now, at times, I believe that it approaches as good as a good product coach. But that's nice to have. That wasn't the right question. I think I was artificially setting the bar too high.
Okay.
So it really does provide you with a competent coach, 7 by 24 access. There's one other thing, Carmen, I didn't mention. So the model's out of the box as long as you give it this guidance. So like we encourage people to do this, if you want to learn the product model, tell the models that you want to learn the product model. That's what you want coaching in. Tell it like we really love the content of Teresa Torres. We really love the content of Shreyash Doshi, you know, SVPG's content. I mean, there are certain people that write about this model. And when you tell it to prioritize that content, you'll get stuff that makes a lot more sense. I have some friends that they complain to me their company absolutely does not want to move. They want to stay on the project model as long as they can. And I'm like, well, tell the models that you want coaching in the project model.
There
And
you go.
it'll show you how to generate a PRD and it'll show you how, sure, you could absolutely do that. But it's different advice. But the last part is if you're in the product model and you're an empowered team, you don't just need a good model and good in general instructions. You want it to understand your strategic context. That's your
Yeah.
product vision, your product strategy, and your team topology. So what we recommend is you load that in to your model. There's, of course, lots of ways to do this. You can use projects, you can use file system, whatever you want to do. But make sure the models understand what my role is. Let's say I'm a product manager on a particular team. Let's say I'm on the shopping cart team. And in a certain kind of company, maybe I'm in a transportation marketplace. And what industry? You want it to know these things so that its advice is as relevant as possible.
Yeah. So for that sort of context document, do you have guidelines on your website on what that looks
Yes.
like? Because that could just
Yeah.
go on and on. Amazing.
We do. And the more the better, really, on that. But the book Empowered describes the
Yeah.
strategic context in detail. So what we do, because we have a bunch of case studies and we
Sure.
share them. In fact, svpg.com/examples, you can see some examples. But of course, that example will let you play. But what you should do is load in your own,
Yes.
your own team topology. And if you don't have a document that has a team topology, it only takes a few minutes to create one.
Yeah.
Just do that and then share it with the model. And then it's amazing. It can tell you, well, you actually depend on these 3 product teams. So you're going to have to collaborate with them in order to get this work done. And super useful.
That's amazing. So I know you talked a little about the project model prompt. How are those? I can imagine how they're different, but if you were doing that project model prompt, what would that look like in comparison to using, for example, that strategic context and all of those things that we know about product? What does that
Yeah,
project prompt look like?
it's really completely different because, and one of the things that's difficult for me is to read all the the vast majority of the chatter online about
Yeah.
AI and the world is all about speeding up the project model. which is just garbage in, garbage out faster. We know that it's burning people out faster than ever because they realize the source of the issue is not your developers. It's really the lack of real product management. So
Mhm.
it's frustrating. So I don't wish that on anybody,
Yeah.
but if what it looks like is speeding up the project model, collecting, how do you decide what goes on your roadmap? Well, your stakeholders or your customers vote for it and through customer service or something. Super. We know how to do that. The model, you can write a prompt to do that. You can write a prompt to give you a roadmap. You can write a prompt to give you a PRD. A lot of people are realizing that if you do what I just described, doesn't take a very smart executive to realize that you are no longer necessary at this company.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's I think an honest truth that everyone is kind of grappling with. So one thing, if we think about sort of the limits, your thoughts on the limits on the AI coaching, where does AI coaching fall short? And so what do you think it gets wrong that that human coach would catch?
It's less and less wrong, although the first year was lots wrong. So it's really got a lot better in that. And for anybody listening that said, "Oh, I tried that a year ago and it was ridiculous,"
Yeah.
because a lot of us felt that way. And I forced myself each time,
Mm-hmm.
generally every few weeks, go through all the models to see what was getting better and what wasn't. So it's pretty dangerous to say it can't do this today. Even, by the way, it's remarkably good at a lot of the politics.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
for a while, people would say, "Oh, it can't do that because that's people, that's human." Well, actually, if you look at, like, we publish a ton of stuff about how to deal with politics. The models have been studying up on this, and
Mhm.
they're actually it can be pretty good. I was with one of the companies I advise, and they have a lot of people can relate to this, an extremely opinionated, strong-willed head of sales.
Mhm.
Big ego, filling up the room.
Yes.
The bro I'm describing, and and the question was asked to me about, how do I navigate this guy? Can't get a word in edgewise, and it's like, hey, let's just do something together here, and let's describe the situation and see if this AI coach can actually give some useful advice, and it does. It actually does. It is very much the same advice, and again, there's a lot published on this. It's like, what do you
Yeah.
do? Well, you have to earn that trust, and how do you do that? And what can you do to make sure it's not your opinion versus his opinion? And so it's pretty good at that. But to answer your question, really, because this is a big thing that my partners and I really debated. Um, it's pretty easy to say that if you're a product creator, a product manager, designer, or an engineer,
Mhm.
that the models today that I'm describing, using the language model as a coach, is pretty good. It's like it used to take on average 3 months if you had a good manager that was willing to coach you to get you to competency.
Mhm.
That's happening faster now. It'll probably take us a year before we know the average, what it's moved down to, but
Mhm.
I'm guessing it's less than half what it was before. So, because it's not one coaching session a week, it's
Sure.
all the time, whenever I need it. I love that. So, uh, and the fact that it's accessible to every single one of your members, no
Mhm.
matter where they are. They can be in Africa, they can be in India, they can be in Asia, and they have access to this. So I love that. It's not just an elite group of companies that
Yes,
have this. Everybody has access to this. So if you don't take advantage of this, it's on you. It's not somebody else's fault.
for sure.
So however, if you're a product leader, there is a lot of useful stuff. For example, those poor product leaders that have told me many times, "Oh, I never worked this way. I'm learning along with my people." And yes, you can absolutely learn along with your people. And so in that sense, the coach is helping you at least as much as it's helping them. However, there is so much politics and nuance at the leader level. That's where I don't believe these statements are contradictory. I think every product leader should use an AI product coach.
Yeah.
However, in my ideal world, every product leader has access to a human product leadership coach, because I keep seeing that makes such a big difference.
And if you were to articulate why it makes such a big difference, what are the parts that the AI coach is missing?
It's not so much missing as there are things that it doesn't even know it doesn't
There
know.
you go. It doesn't
I
know.
mean, it's this stuff like when I'm actually giving an example. One of the best managers I ever worked for was Jennifer Bailey. She's the senior VP at Apple for all the payment stuff now. She was just an awesome manager that just defined coaching to me in my mind. She was coached by Bill Campbell too, who was one of the
Wow.
most famous.
Amazing.
So that's a reason she was so great at that. But, I remember her, I was working on something pretty difficult, and I remember her explaining to me how each C-level person at the company thought. We worked together at Netscape,
Yeah.
how they reasoned through. And I'm going, oh my God. I mean, I was like a blind person reaching for the lights before. I had no idea. And she's like shining a light. This person, here's how he thinks. Here's how he views the world. And it's like the models don't know this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's so valuable, that kind of knowledge. And that's just an instance, an example, but they don't know this. And that's where a real product leadership coach that has been around the block, worked with a lot of, leadership teams, senior leadership teams, understands the agenda of salespeople and how they work, and the concepts of account control and why there's important, and understands how a CFO thinks. These are super valuable. Over time, maybe we'll see. But for now, I would say a product leader should do what you can to get your company to get you a product leadership coach. And anybody listening, by the way, you can there's no money involved with the AI model coach. So that's just, you can do that. If you want a product leadership coach referral, we don't do that, and we don't charge anything, and we don't ask for any kind of kickback or whatever. But we do have a list of product leadership coaches we think are good. And these are people who have convinced us they actually understand the product model rather than just the project model. So if anybody does want an introduction to a product leadership coach, just email me. Tell me where you're based, and I will send you a name or two. No problem.
I love that. Thank you. And thank you for that. And we'll put information in the show notes. I think that just going back to that, what it doesn't know is sort of the human nuances and drivers of folks who are making decisions that you have to work with. So I think that I'd like to understand, I think the audience would also like to understand, when we talk about coaching, so we say 24/7 coaching, what does a session look like just in practice? I can imagine you having a question about how might I go about this in the product model, and it would tell you, but it's almost like you have to originate what that curriculum like is for you, which is great. But if you don't know, what does that look like, or what should that look like?
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. And of course, the broad answer could be so almost anything,
For
infinite,
sure.
because, just like with a human coach, we talk about all kinds of things. Now, typically, a good human coach, the first thing they do is raise your level of skill, right? This is referred to as product sense. In
Yes.
fact, it's kind of table stakes. Without this, you're useless really to everybody. So you need this product sense. Like I said, it takes normally a few months. So for those initial interactions, what we encourage, and we give a script of things you should do this. Like, you should ask the coach to teach you about your data, teach you about what KPIs are the most important for our kind of business. I do that now before I go talk even to a company. I'll go, tell me about, I've never worked with that kind of company before. They're in this kind of space. And so tell me about that industry. Who are the major players? How does a company decide if they're healthy or not? What are the KPIs? And then what are the dynamics in there? The sort of the flywheel. What is that dynamic? It's amazing at that. So it takes me from nothing, right? What you read in a Wall Street Journal to some literacy, and then you can go deeper. So anyway, you build knowledge of the users, build knowledge of the industry, the competitive landscape, the business, the data. I like to ask about the different kinds of users and customers and what are their motivations? Why do they buy this product? Why do they use this kind of product? What other solutions do they use? Fantastic for that. This is all stuff that used to take a lot longer to do.
Yes,
But notice right now, we're just talking about building my basis of knowledge to sort of like be somebody that one of the VPs at our company would be able to have a useful dialogue with. Now, contrast that with a typical agile product owner that doesn't know anything other than how to manage a sprint planning session. Right? They sit down with the stakeholder, and the stakeholder goes, you have no clue. You don't know our customers. You don't know our business. You don't know our data. You're not somebody I can partner with. It's ridiculous. So you need to first get that level. Now, let's say you've done that. And I was saying before, that's probably somewhere between your first few weeks of using an AI coach and a couple months, somewhere in there. Now, let's say we feel pretty good. And now, if we're a product team, we've got one or more problems to solve. So now our questions, our interactions are going to be a lot more directed. It's like, okay, I'm working on the customer onboarding problem. That's what we've been asked to work on. So I have lots of questions. What's the best technique for doing this? Is this something that I should use the customer discovery program for? Is this something that I should recruit users for? It's terrific, this coach, at the techniques. It knows all the main techniques. A good example I was just showing another company is one technique I love is Teresa Torres's opportunity solution trees. It's a great way of scoping out the beginning and getting ready to build to learn. That's exactly what it's for. Super. And it's like you tell the coach, I want to create an opportunity solution tree in the Teresa Torres style. Help me through that process. What do I need? Let's decisions. And it will literally quickly help you create a very useful one. And then you can have a dialogue about each option and say, what do you think the risks are here? And okay, you're saying I have a big, viability risk around compliance. How would I test that? Teach me about what the compliance officer cares about. You see where we're going? And all of these are right in the sweet spot of what this, language model as AI coach can help you with.
I love it. It's so powerful as you're speaking about all of the different frameworks and the ways to apply it. It's super powerful.
And I think you see the difference, Carl, between, this is what drives me nuts. So many of the other people in the project model are just saying, oh, I can hit a button and generate a PRD. That's useless. That is such a worthless example, use of good tokens. It's a lot of tokens.
You
that's what people do. And they're so proud of themselves because they thought their job was to literally write a PRD. No, your job is to actually discover something worth documenting in a PRD.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, when we look at our community of PMs, like especially ones that are in large enterprises or big companies or, regulated industries, and that accessibility, I think there probably is going to be, you're gonna have to establish like what your company is ready for. Because yes, I agree with you. You go through the product model, you apply all of those components, but you also have to bring everyone with you. So looking at what phase your organization is, you're going to have to look at that as well. Because if, to your point, if they still want to propagate that project model, or maybe it's hybrid, all of these components, you're going to have to figure out how to actually layer those in. But it's still such a valuable tool, I think, to be able to have that product coach with you. And maybe in doing so, you're able to move that needle. Is that what are you seeing that in maybe some transformative organizations?
You know what? It is a super legitimate point, but it's orthogonal to whether you're the product model or the project model.
Okay.
In other words, in some, look, there are companies out there still that won't let you use Dropbox because
Yeah.
they're like, oh, that's a security risk. We don't put our stuff in the cloud. I'm like, give me a break, But there are companies that are still there. There's a whole theory about this. It's called the technology adoption curve. Some companies very quickly move to these things. Other companies have to be dragged kicking and screaming. Now, we are seeing this adoption curve play out on GenAI technologies for creating products. There are some CEOs that literally say, if you're not using these tokens every quarter, you're fired.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, they're saying that. These are CEOs that are pushing. There are other companies that are, you're not allowed to use this stuff in our company because it has not been blessed by our security and our compliance people. My partner, Christian, was recently, just a few weeks ago, with, I'm saying this publicly because this executive posted on LinkedIn this, and you should look it up. It's amazing. He is the senior vice president for compliance of one of the biggest banks in Asia, Standard Chartered Bank. And my partners there showing these teams how to use AI to do their jobs, and it's amazing. And then they're all going like, "Oh, we're not allowed to use AI," and he's like, "What are you talking about?" So he says, "Who says that?" And so the senior VP is introduced to him, and he says, "Do me a favor, come to this session." To his credit, he did. Within a couple hours, he brought his entire staff there. By the end of the day, he announced a major policy change for the bank that they are all using this.
Wow.
So
Wow.
what he did there was just accelerate the adoption curve. They would have come around to that conclusion anyway. It's like, how many companies do you know are not allowed to use the internet?
Yeah.
But I was around when the internet came out. There were a lot of companies that refused to use the internet because of all the bad things that might happen, to them. And cloud was like, it's too scary. If it wasn't on premise, it was bad. So this is normal. And it's just an adoption curve thing. And unfortunately, that happens no matter what model you're using. So the good news is, even though we all know it takes time to work through the adoption curve, usually years, there is more speed for this one than any other major technological change I've ever seen. And I think it's just because the advantages are just so compelling.
I 1,000% agree. I have to say, I had to be honest, I knew coming into this conversation, we would have some really great examples and discussions and, what was coming out of it. But I think I'm really realizing that there is such an actionable moment here, especially for our community. Like, the folks need exactly what you've described. We're hearing, what do I do? How do I transform? What can I do that's actionable? And I think that there's something really here that we'll share resources out and point to the resources that you have. But I think really within our organization, it would be amazing to really build out some kind of coaching resource. They're there, but for us to facilitate that as well. So I'm coming out of that conversation, I'm really inspired to do that within our organization, and hopefully we'll have your help and support to get that out there. So very exciting. We just have a few minutes left. Anything that you would want to say to our community, or advice as far as the AI coaching and given the landscape of all of this change?
Well, it is like any major technological shift. Some people will come out really doing well, really well, and some will be left behind. So I understand that. I have a lot of, empathy for the people who don't want to change, don't want to deal with it. But if you do, And I think probably people that are members of the community, they have goals and aspirations to really improve in their careers, which is why they get the help of a community like Women in Product. And so if that's your goal, I would argue this is a game changer. And I honestly have never said that before about anything else. I've always said a tool is a tool, and but this is beyond a tool. It is a
Yeah.
game changer. And I mean, the internet was a game changer, mobile was a game changer, but this is, I think, really defining moment. And if you, at the very least, maybe you don't really trust what I'm saying, people are listening, but give it 30 minutes. Just set it up like at a minimum, like we just standard, we can, in those articles we'll
Yes.
reference, you can just use the defaults we provide. You can always make them cooler, whatever you want to do. Just use the default, give it 30 minutes and see if you don't feel like, oh my gosh, this could help me become, if I'm here in my career, I can get to here. Whether you're an individual contributor, or whether you're an aspiring product person, or whether you're an experienced product leader, I really think this can help you take your career to the next level. And that can only help you. And especially when that we have this other trend going on in the industry, which is to reduce costs.
Yes.
So the people that where their contribution is not crystal clear, they are vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that everybody knows that today. They're vulnerable. So, I want the people to do well and to really have something they love. I also try to tell people, because a lot of them are former feature team product managers.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever met a feature team product manager that actually liked their job.
Yeah. I think they want to be on the path to be the true like product manager and be like part of the product model. And sometimes the role is not that.
They want to create great stuff that their customers love. They don't want to just be, order takers.
Absolutely.
Delivering the next dumb feature that some executive decided. So they want to really make a difference. And my point is, you owe it to yourself to see if you can do that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Marty, thank you so much for your time. There's so much wisdom, tools, and really actionable things, I think, for the community and beyond. And we'd love to see you again, but thank you so much for your time. It was great.
I hope it was useful. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This podcast is an original production of Women in Product. Follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or the Women in Product YouTube channel. Leave us a review so that others can discover us, or share this episode with someone you know. Original music provided by Jimmy Hahn.